Hello everyone. Today we are going to find out the difference between active voice and passive voice. Right from childhood, whenever we are taught grammar, we are taught that there are two kinds of voice. One is the active voice and one is the passive voice. We are told to convert it. We are also told how to convert it. For instance, when a question is given that you have to convert from active voice to passive voice, and the sentence is Ram kicked the football. In passive voice, it will become the football was kicked by Ram, or Sita opened the door, and it becomes the door was opened by Sita. Tell me one thing though, is there any difference between these two voices? Do you see any difference in meaning? If there is no difference in meaning, then why do we need two different voices? There must be something. There must be some reason why we use active voice and passive voice. Today, we are going to find out what the difference is, and also we are going to learn how to turn the active voice into passive voice. Now, give me just a moment until I start my screen sharing. Okay, here we go. So, just a moment, we're going to hit the play button. There we go. Right. So, active and passive voice, and here's what it says. Two voices, one meaning. Like I said, in active voice, it is the boy opened the door, and in passive voice, it is the door was opened by the boy. Like I was saying before, what is the difference exactly? Now, here is what the difference is. Here is why where you find out what is the difference between active voice and passive voice, and where we use the passive voice instead of the active voice. See, the active voice is easy to use, right? Then why are we using the passive voice at all? These are the reasons. So the reason is the object is more important than the subject. Do you know what the object is? You're familiar with verbs. A verb is a word that shows any action. Like we just discussed, the boy kicked the football. So when you say kicked, kicking is an action. That becomes your verb. Now, who did the action? The boy. So the boy is the subject. And on what thing was that action done? It was done on the football. So the football is the object. So in order to find out what the object is, you look at the verb, you see what the action is, or whatever the word that is describing the action, that is your verb. You look at the verb and you see on what that action is being done, that is the object. Okay. So when the object is more important than the subject, you take the object first. Okay. This is the same thing, when let us say we are introducing some dignitaries on the stage, we take the most important name first, correct? So in the same way, whatever is more important, you will discuss that first. So the object is more important than the subject, then you use the passive voice. For example, the printing press was invented in 1440. Okay. Now, just a moment. Right. So the object is more important than the subject. But here, the subject is not even mentioned. Who invented it? It's not mentioned. It was invented in 1440. That is more important. So if you're not talking about who was the inventor of the printing press, then it doesn't matter. So it is the object that you're focusing on. That means you can very easily say the printing press was invented in 1440. So because the object, the printing press, is more important, you use this sentence and you use the object first. You put the object at the beginning of the sentence. Okay. Then sometimes we don't know who the subject is. So we have an action. An action is done, and that action is done on something. We know that we know about the action, we know about the object. That is, we know what it is that the action was done on, but we have no idea who the action doer was. Okay, so for example, the window was left open last night. So let us say there was a burglary in the house. How did the thieves enter the house? So you can say the window was left open last night. We don't know whose mistake it was. We don't know who left the window open, but the thieves were able to climb through the window. And when you're narrating this, you can say that instead of saying somebody left the window open, you can just say the window was left open last night. Okay. Then it is obvious to the listener who the subject is. Okay, students were told that there will be no entry in college without masks. Now, this brings us back to uh, the current situation, that is COVID. But anyway, so what does it say? When you know who the subject is, it is very obvious. You don't even have to discuss who the subject is, that is who the doer of the action is. Then you don't mention the subject at all. You can straight away go to the passive voice. So students were told that there will be no entry in college without masks. What does this mean? Simply means that the students were told by someone. Who is this someone? It has to be some kind of authority. It is either the principal or the vice principal or the teachers. Somebody must have told the students. Somebody in a position of authority. So it doesn't matter. Also, it is very obvious that one of these people must have said, what is more important is what was told to the students. What were the students told? Students were told that there will be no entry in college without masks. No need to discuss the subject. So also another thing, the subject has already been mentioned. Okay, if the subject has been mentioned once, you don't need to mention it again, which means you can easily use the passive voice for it. Okay, give me one moment, please, again. Right. So this government is committed to reduce crime. Okay, now again, what is the action? Reducing crime. And who is committed? The government. So here, if you see, the subject has been mentioned, the object has not been mentioned. So again, here also, you can say this is where we use the passive voice. Now take a step back. I've already explained this in short, but you really have to clear these fundamentals if you want to understand what is active voice and what is passive voice. How do you identify the active voice? How do you identify the passive voice in order to do that? Or how do you decide where to use the active and where to use the passive voice? So to do this, what do you have to do? You first have to identify the structure of that particular sentence. When you know what the structure is, it becomes easier for you to identify what kind of a sentence it is. Okay, now the most common sentence structure, the most common is subject plus verb plus object. This is called S plus V plus O. The verb denotes action. What does the verb tell you? The verb tells you what the action is. The subject is the doer of the action. I've already mentioned this. Whoever is doing the action is the subject, and the object is what the action is done on. Whatever that action is that the verb is describing, that action, whatever that action is done on, that thing is called the object. Now, examples. I dropped my phone. The action is dropping, right? So I is the subject doing the action, that is dropping. Dropped is the verb. First and foremost, you should be able to identify the verb. Wherever the action is, that is where the verb is. There are different forms of verbs also which do not have any action, but let us not go into that right now at all, because we really don't want to confuse ourselves. Right now, we are only going to talk about verbs that denote action. And in any case, active voice and passive voice is only possible in sentences that have this kind of structure. Okay, or that have this kind of verb that shows some kind of action. All right, so dropped is the verb that tells you what the action is. Okay, I is the doer of the action, so that becomes the subject, and my phone is the object, because what was dropped? On what thing was the action of dropping done? It was my phone. So when you say S plus V plus O, it becomes I is S, dropped is V, and my phone is O. Now, when we're using simple sentences, we use the active voice. But when we want to make the object more important, we use the passive voice. Now, how to turn active voice into passive? Rule 1. Instead of S plus V plus O, the sentence structure has to be O plus V plus S. You know that, see, by instinct, you have been doing this correctly. Whenever you're given a sentence in the active voice, you just flip it around and it becomes the passive voice, right? So, but then there are certain rules to it. You can't just flip it around. There are certain changes that the verb undergoes. If you understand these changes, it is very helpful. Rule 2, changes have to be made to the verb depending on the tense in the original sentence. Okay, remember the past and past participle forms of the verb and auxiliary verbs that help change the tense. As I just said, you can't just flip the sentence around. Like when I say Ram kicked the ball, you can't say the ball kicked Ram, right? You'll have to make changes accordingly to the verb to show that the action was exactly the same, whether it is you're talking in active voice or whether you're talking in passive voice. Okay, so for that, the verb needs to be changed. And what changes do you do do you make to the verb? That depends on the original sentence. In the original sentence, what was the tense? According to that, you will change in the passive voice. Now, for this, it is very important for you to remember the forms of verbs. Do you remember these? The past and the past participle forms of verbs. I'll give you a few examples. Go, went, gone. Do, did, done. Sing, sang, sung. Work, worked, worked. You have learned all of these when you were kids in school, correct? So the last word, as we say, go, went, gone. Gone is the past participle. Okay, do, did, done. Done is the past participle. These forms you have to remember, and you have to remember auxiliary verbs. What are auxiliary verbs? Auxiliary verbs are helping verbs. These are forms of is, have, do. Okay, so is, do you know what the forms of is are? The forms of is are these: is, am, are, was, were, will be. Let's go on to the next slide. Now, active to passive in the present tense. I'll just give you a tip. Whenever you're looking at this lecture, maybe click whenever you're looking at this presentation, just click a picture of this particular slide. When you do this, most of your problems are sorted. You'll get a formula. You must have heard people saying that grammar is like mathematics because it is a very scoring aspect of your paper. But then there is another reason why grammar is like mathematics. Grammar also has formulas like mathematics. And if you use those formulas, you can't go wrong. So for example, I eat an apple. This is the simple present tense, and we are talking in the active voice. Now S plus V1. When I say V1, it is the main verb, or it is the present form of the verb. When I say V2, it is the past form of the verb. And when I say V3, it is the past participle of the verb. Just remember that much. Okay. Now, when I say I eat an apple, it is S plus V1 plus O. Until now, we were just discussing S plus V plus O, that is subject plus verb plus object. Now, what are we discussing? We are going into a little more detail so that we are helped in converting the sentences from active to passive. So we are talking about the forms of verb. Here, when I say eat, eat is the simple present form of the verb. So I eat an apple is S plus V1 plus O. When you make it the passive voice, it is an apple is eaten by me. So object, definitely you take first. There you don't even have to think. But how is the verb changed? Object plus present tense auxiliary verb plus verb plus S. Okay. There has to be a slight difference here. It should be V3, that is the third form of the verb. Just remember that much. Make that change in your own notes. So an apple is eaten by me. An apple is the object. Is the present tense auxiliary verb. I told you auxiliary verbs are forms of to be, have, and do. So is a form of to be, and it is the present tense auxiliary verb, right? So when you say I eat an apple, when you turn it into the passive voice, it becomes an apple is eaten by me. An apple is the object. Is is the present tense auxiliary verb followed by eaten, which is the third form of the verb, which is the past participle, and plus s, that is the subject, by me. It's that simple. Now, when you're talking about the present continuous tense, I am eating an apple. It is s, that is subject, plus present tense auxiliary verb plus ing. Ing is called the gerund form, but instead of using that technical term, I'm just going to say ing. So when you say I am eating an apple, it's the active voice. And how is this active voice formed in the present continuous tense? Subject plus present tense auxiliary verb, which is am, and a verb, that is eat, plus ing, then it becomes eating plus object, that is an apple. Now, again, you use the formula that I have given you below it, which is the passive voice. What is the formula? O. O is an apple. Okay. Present tense auxiliary verb. It is. Then plus being plus V3. V3 is eaten. What is the past participle of eat? Eaten. And S. Subject is me. It clearly becomes an apple is being eaten by me. If you dissect this entire sentence structure, very simple. O. Again, let us take a look at it. O plus present tense auxiliary verb plus being plus V3 plus S. You have to remember these formulas. Also, don't think that it is very complicated. When you start learning these, you'll slowly realize that there is a pattern here and you'll be able to pick up these very easily. Also, if you have done it in the present tense, the past tense and the future tense also becomes easy. So it is basically this one frame that you have to remember more. And when you remember this, you'll be able to remember the others as well. So, okay. As I was saying, if we dissect this sentence, O plus present tense auxiliary verb plus being plus V3 plus S. Okay. O is an apple. Present tense auxiliary verb is plus being we have written an apple is being plus V3, that is eaten, and the subject is me, so by me. Okay, so just apply these formulas and you will come to the correct answer each time. Now take a look at the third one, which is the present perfect tense. I have eaten an apple. Now an apple has been eaten by me. Again, the first structure is S plus have or has depending on the subject. Plus V3. V3 is the third form of the verb, which is past participle, plus O, which is object. So I is the subject, have or has. Now I has, we don't say I has, we say I have. So out of has or have, we have chosen have. So I have eaten, which is the third form of the verb, which is the past participle. I have eaten plus O, the past, the object. So I have eaten an apple. That becomes the sentence structure. Below that, what have I written? O plus have or has been plus V3 plus S. So object is an apple, have or has. Now, again, you have to you have to see whether it is related to the subject or the object. Now, when you are doing the passive voice, you have to remember that the object is the auxiliary verb is related to the object, not to the subject. So here, an apple, it won't be, you won't be saying have, like in the active voice. You'll be saying has. So an apple has plus been becomes has been plus V3 eaten plus subject by me. Simple. As far as the present perfect continuous tense goes, there is no passive voice for that. Again, this is the active to passive voice in the past tense. So we first did it in the present tense. Secondly, we are doing it in the past tense. Sorry. Again, just please take a photo of this screen and remember that you just have to follow these sentence structures. You just have to simply follow these formulas and you will never go wrong. Your answers will always be correct. You will always score full marks. So we go on to the next slide, which is the future tense. Again, the same things. Let's just go back for a minute. Let me explain a little bit, although I don't have to anymore. But let's just take an example. The active voice in the past continuous tense, the second column. I was eating an apple. What is the sentence structure? Subject plus past tense auxiliary verb plus ing plus o. Subject is I, past tense auxiliary verb is was, verb is eat plus ing plus o is apple. I'm sorry. Now, an apple was being eaten by me. That is the answer for the passive voice. How is the passive voice made? O plus past tense auxiliary verb plus being plus V3 plus S. Now let's see if this sentence fits in this formula. What is this sentence? Object is an apple. Past tense auxiliary verb is was plus being plus V3. V3 is eaten. Eat, ate, eaten, right? So eaten is the past participle plus subject by me. So it becomes a perfect sentence. An apple was being eaten by me. Next, in the future tense, again, we'll discuss only one over here because you get the general point. Let us take the future perfect tense here. Now, in the future perfect tense, what do you say? I had eaten an apple. If you're talking in the, I'm sorry. This is wrong. Again, I'll get this corrected. I'll send you a new one. Let us just take the simple future tense. I will eat an apple. Okay, so I is the subject. Will is again actually the auxiliary form, but here we have just written will because whatever subject you write, you can use will with it. Plus V1, that is the first form of the verb, and object, that is an apple. And when you convert it into the passive voice, an apple will be eaten by me. So how does the structure go? Object, an apple, will be plus V3, that is eaten, by subject, that is by me. Okay, please take a look at the future perfect tense again. This has actually been this is actually the past tense. I will get it changed and I'll share a fresh PPT with you. Until then, just remember that the formulas are set and you have to go only according to those formulas. Things to remember. It is not true that we have to learn the rules of grammar first in order to learn a language now. This is very, very important. What happens is that when we hear these formulas, these are very complicated. I won't lie to you. I understand it is very complicated. S, V, V1, V3, B, being, plus auxiliary verb, plus whatever verb, all this is very confusing. Gerund forms. So when you want to learn a new language, or when you want to learn English for that matter, if you're told that you have to learn the grammar of that language and only then you'll be able to learn that language, you become intimidated. You become you become a little discouraged. You don't want to learn all those rules of grammar in order to just say one sentence, right? But the thing is that we don't have to learn the rules of grammar in order to learn a language. I know that whatever I have taught right now is a little confusing. It is a little scary, but do not get scared. Okay. The next thing is trying to speak while fitting our sentences inside the frame of grammar is very slow and it will damage your confidence. So if you want to speak a sentence, before speaking, just imagine, even if you're speaking in Marathi or if you're speaking in Hindi, if you really have to think about grammar first, like if you say, Mala college-la जायला आवडतं. Okay, so what tense is this? Huh? Then would you say मला or would you say me college-ला जायला आवडतं? Is that correct? Or is it correct to say me college जायला आवडतं? So if you continuously think of the rules, it becomes very confusing. Just say it. I recently heard a South Indian person tell somebody, हमारे पास भूख नहीं है. What he wanted to say is मुझे भूख नहीं है. But the meaning was conveyed. We had a good laugh about it, but the meaning was conveyed. So remember that just start speaking. That will make your life easier. When you try to fit in all your words inside the frame of grammar, you've been told this is grammar, this is exactly how your sentence structure should be. And if you go wrong here, your sentence will be wrong. Yes, it will be wrong. But does that mean communication won't happen? It will happen. And it doesn't matter if you make a few mistakes. I'll tell you why. Grammar looks complicated, but it is easier if we learn the language first. Okay. Now, if you learn the language, like I told you, what is a verb? A verb is anything that shows action. Okay. Now you know English at least somewhat. When I say play, you understand the meaning. When I say run, you understand the meaning. When I say walk, you understand the meaning. When I say sing, you understand the meaning. When I say learn, you understand the meaning, right? So you already know the language a little bit. If you were to hear the same words in German, would you understand them? No, even I don't understand them. So because you know the language, you know exactly what I'm talking about when I tell you that any word that shows action is a verb. Okay. Why are you able to tell this? Because you already know the language a little bit. So what I'm trying to tell you here is that once you know the language, it becomes easier for you to understand. What? Understand the rules of grammar. So this is why, because you know the language, because you know the words, because you understand the words, it is easy for you to identify a verb. Why? Because I told you that anything that shows action is a verb. Okay. So just remember one thing. What is a grammar for? Any grammar is for refining your use of language. First start speaking, first start writing, first start using that language, and then try and understand the grammar to make it to make your language better, to make your language more correct. The best way to learn a language is to start speaking or writing, even if you're not perfect. You will get better with practice. This is a promise I make to you. The more you use this language, the easier it will become for you. Trust me. Consider your mother tongue. I just gave you an example right now. You learn the language first and then it's grammar, right? The same is true for any language, including English. You learn to speak Marathi at home even before you went to school, correct? And then later, much later in school, you were taught Marathi grammar. It's easier to understand grammar once you have learned the language. Now, whether you understood grammar or not, you're speaking Marathi today, right? So what is the purpose of grammar? The purpose of grammar is definitely to learn language, but that is not where you start. I'm telling you all this because I don't want you to be afraid of all these formulas. I don't want you to be scared of grammar. Grammar is there. But the thing is, if you're really if you're really at ease with this language, you won't even have to look at the rules. You'll immediately find out what the answer is. And thank you. So just remember, before I sign off, I'd really say that we all know that English is an important language. We all know that it is a must to learn this language in this day and age. But it is also scary because you're afraid of making mistakes. Don't be afraid. Everybody learns only by making mistakes. Even as kids, when we learned our own mother tongue, even then we made mistakes when we talked. It is all right. You learn everything by first making mistakes, even walking, cycling, driving, whatever you do, everything. You first make mistakes and then you learn. So it is perfectly all right to make mistakes in English also. It is not quite all right to make mistakes in an examination because then you lose marks and you get left behind. That is why I'm showing you all these rules of grammar. Just remember, in order to speak English though, you don't really have to be so stressed about its grammar. All right. So thank you, everybody. And let's sign off now. So I hope that this was an informative session, and I hope that this has been helpful for you all. Thank you.